Right, so next up we've got C3, I apologise, we have C4, we have Power System Technical Performance with Babak.
Okay,
It's again.
thank you.
Yep.
So this guy going,
Yep.
that's the only thing we need to do,
That's
right?
what you have to do, yep. all
Okay.
good, okay.
Right. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Angela, for the introduction. I'm really very pleased to be here. This is first for me, actually, and first I want to thank my very good friend Andrew Halley for passing this ship in a very good shape to me. So, so thank you, Andrew. And now I have actually a few slides. I'm actually not talking much about the type of work that we do. I'm really trying to provide examples of what we've done and who are under basically the people, especially in Australia, people that rather than talking about numbers, but real people that have done this work, and would obviously be very happy to discuss with you and have any questions or interest to join any of the working groups. So C4 is a little bit of it's one of the widest areas of work as far as the other study committees are concerned, and it has been essentially like sort of islands, very different islands, ranging from phenomena of nanoseconds, microseconds, then coming to seconds, tens of seconds, minutes. Now, what brings all this together are essentially and underpins all this, and then around a couple of decades ago made this C4 study committee basically are the tools, methods, techniques that underpins power system analysis, and then how it can be used to essentially analyze the power system technical performance as a whole. So these are basically the sub-groups within the C4 study committee. And the numbers and the focus and composition has been changing over the years and over the decades. Historically, the EMI, EMC, Installation Coordination, Lightning have been some of the strongest in terms of working groups activities. It is changing to some extent, and as it is highlighted in the numbers that I put in the top right box, is that at this point we are seeing most of the active working groups in the power system dynamics, and that is followed by the power quality. And it's interesting also to note that these are the two main activities where we are strongest in Australia, basically. So what the core focus areas are internationally is very consistent with our basically a strength. And then underneath I put basically, and the intent of this is not really compare us against anyone, say that we take a basic trophy because we have had the highest number of working groups approved last year, but to highlight a challenge that we need to also maintain quality, and that only can come by peer review. And typically there are certain number of people that are involved in these reviews, which the key point I want to convey here is that it's going to be a little bit slower for us this year and the year after in terms of approval of working groups, so that we can make sure that the 43 active working groups that we currently have, that's a very big number. And coincidentally, we also have 43 regular and observer members at the international level. So how we can essentially make sure the quality of these publications are maintained. And then below I have highlighted some of the recently approved and ongoing C4 working groups. The good point is that we have currently actually two Australian conveners. One is Jason David here, and the other person that unfortunately not with us today, Sachin Goyal from PowerLink. I also personally had a working group which is now concluded. I'll talk about that in the next couple of slides, basically. Also, I had the privilege of leading a SIGRE Green Book that is on power system dynamics, and we have a few active members from Australia. And one thing also to highlight before I forget, that the overall study committee secretary is also from Australia, so that's a plus for us. Genevieve Litz, that relocated this year from Germany to Australia. Also, my former colleague and friend Nilesh contributing to this Green Book. And then I mentioned the other two working groups that have are currently going on. And then moving on to the publications. So we had actually 6 technical brochures that published, and I highlighted the 2 that perhaps most relevant to what we do in Australia and what our concerns are. Technical brochure 851, which was a joint working group with C2, and I think Greg also mentioned that briefly, and we had 1 representation from Australia. And then the technical brochure 881, which I personally had the privilege to lead, and we had 4 members from Australia, which highlights one of the biggest challenges that we have in this country to essentially have a sustainable energy transition. Now, in terms of the publication in Science and Engineering Journal, we also had a good number, so this is what has been published to date. I'm expecting that at least there will be another 2 that will be in the next, but this is all I can report on at this point in time. Again, and I'm just repeating myself, but where we are working in Australia are primarily power system dynamics and power quality, and these are basically our biggest challenges by far, and it's sort of happening across the world, and I will highlight that in other slides that I will have, and in particular this one, which is a summary of essentially what happened in the space of C4 in CIGRE Paris session, and the 3 preferential subjects that we had until now. The first one, like I said, is the combination of power quality and EMC basically, and then the preferential subject 2 is installation coordination, and the third one, and this has been changing, and basically some years we had power system dynamics as the PS1, and in 2024 this is now again back moving as a PS1 as a recognition that this is probably covering 60 to 70% of what is happening in basically study committee C4, and it might be best to call it PS1 because regardless it would attract the highest number of papers, which I've actually put here, as you can very clearly see from the numbers also. So PS3 attracts most of the papers, and likewise I have put in the right-hand side columns the number of GDM presentations, and for those of you that haven't been attending one of these CIGRE Paris sessions, so these are typically presentations of 3 to maximum 4 minutes, and I'm very proud to also report that we had approximately 30% of the GDM presentations were from Australia, so 10 of 34 basically. And last but not the least, to also thank Sarat Pereira, which again not here. He was the special reporter for PS1, and myself also helping on the PS3. So we had special reporters on 2 of the 3 preferential subjects. Now, in terms of our Australian side, so now moving from the international level to Australia, so we had actually a meeting at the end of July, and thanks to Electronet, who basically hosted us, and the timing of this was fairly deliberate to make sure that we basically coordinate and attract as many as GDM submissions, which, like I mentioned in the previous slide, we had 10 of the 34 submissions. And that was actually followed by a tour at the Robertstown site, where the 2 of the 4 synchronous condensers in Australia are located. And our next annual meeting is going to be, unsurprisingly, during the Cairns Symposium. And the last slide that I have here is just to highlight that what is going to happen for us in the case you are hopefully joining the Cairns Symposium, that we basically going to have a very full program. As Alex was mentioning, we already have 37 paper, and I expect that would go to at least 45 paper. And again, like 70% of submissions from Australia, which is really, really pleasing to see. And what I can tell you is that probably 75% of those papers are on power system dynamics, another 20 or so is on power quality, and perhaps no more than 5% on the areas of installation coordination, lightning, which not to undermine the importance of those areas by any nature, but they are becoming perhaps some of the more established and more known and understood, and perhaps less impacted by the energy transition that we are experiencing. So this is basically the schedule that we have, and I appreciate that I have gone quickly over some of these points, but I'm obviously here. Please come and talk to me if you are interested to be involved in any of these activities, whether it's Green Book or working group or any other activity. We are very interested to have additional people actually, and speaking of which, we currently have 33 people, 4 are approved, they will be joining in January, so it's 37, and I'm hoping that that would also go up by this time next year as I'm reporting my next report. Thank you very much, that's all for me.